So, ladies, thank you so much for joining me. This is the first time that I've actually had podcast hosts as podcast guests. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to do it.
This is so interesting to be on the other side.
I agree. Thank you for having us.
Of course. So, I mean, how did you two end up forming your podcast on the other side of a pandemic? Because I feel like I can only speak for myself here, but the pandemic was this crazy time of assessing what's important in your life, what isn't. Thousands of people changed careers. Chloe and I both changed careers that we had been on forever. I personally was ready to do that a lot earlier than I did, but it was the catalyst that kind of like pushed me through the other side, and somehow found podcasting on the other side of that. Like, I'd always wanted to do this, but it would never have happened had the pandemic not caused me to leave, quit, move, do different things, play with the digital medium and just creating stuff that had kind of, I think, been stored in the back of my head. So maybe you guys can both speak to your pandemic experience, coming out on the other side of that, and we'll just continue to unpack like the Continua, everything you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. And so yeah, I'll shut up.
You host like we do, Abe.
Good.
Aliyah, you want to start?
I'll let you go.
Okay. So I can talk about my pandemic experience. Actually, similar to you, Abe, I should have left a while ago, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do after I left. So I just decided to stay. I stayed for too long. And when the pandemic hit, I kind of realized that I was so much happier and I had more of a life being at home and training my clients at home. And I valued that. I really didn't realize like how little sleep I got. I didn't realize like how my health was really depreciating. Because it happened so like incrementally, and then you look back and you're like, oh shit, what just oh, can we curse on this podcast?
Oh yeah, just let it rip.
Okay.
All the way. Just say it all.
Okay. But yeah, it was such a surprise to me that I think it was really the night that we found out that the club was closing. I got like 12 hours of sleep that night, and the night after, and then the third night. It was like 12 to 13 hours of sleep for 3 nights in a row. And I was like, what? I didn't realize how sleep deprived. Yeah, right. I did not realize how sleep deprived I was. And yeah, I think I was ready to leave for a few reasons, but I think what really pushed me forward was Continua and meeting Aliyah. And just realizing that I wanted a little bit more autonomy in how I present myself to the world and who I can work with. So, I mean, Abe, you know that Equinox is a very small kind of elite group of people, who sign up for the club. So I just wanted to branch out a little bit more and be able to impact more people.
How did you feel you were presented to the world? Because that's an interesting perspective to feel like you want to change that.
Yeah. So actually I'll back up a little bit. So I grew up in a very musical family. My dad is a bass player, my mom's a singer, very like creative musical household. And I was just an athlete from a very young age. And so that's kind of how I identified myself as. And I never really tapped into the creative side of myself. I almost like, I viewed it as like the other part of Chloe that like shouldn't be seen at work ever.
Right.
Because that's not professional, And so, especially when I got to tier X, you're viewed as
elite,
like the elite. Yeah. You're viewed as the elite of Equinox. And so that kind of comes with some pressure. At least I felt that came with a little bit of pressure to, to act a certain way at the club, to dress a certain way, to have my hair a certain way. Like there were so many things that I like had to pay attention to that I didn't really want to pay attention to because I just
Yeah.
wanted to be myself. And so yeah, I kind of like not hid, but like tucked that part of me away. Especially when I got to Tier X. I think I was a little bit more like I was a little bit more free at my other club.
Yeah.
Because they kind of let me do what I wanted to do because I was doing so well. So they were like, let's just let Chloe do her thing type
Right.
of thing. But yeah, once I got to Tier X, I was, I was kind of a leader. I was thought of as a leader at the club. And so that came with responsibilities. And I think it was more of myself putting these pressures on too. Like because I've always viewed myself as Chloe the athlete and like, uh, Chloe the science person, like come to Chloe when you need help with anything having to do with your body. Like I can heal you. Like I'm, anything nutrition, like I'm the person to go to. That's my friends and family. They all come to me. So I thought like, oh, well, if I start posting videos of myself singing, or if I start, wearing my hair a certain way, like I would be viewed other than that, which for some reason I thought was a bad thing.
Weird how we do that to ourselves. The perception, like we create, we definitely create limitations, but we'll tie them to situations like that too. Like what's odd is if you had done all that stuff, you only would have been celebrated for it. But
Mhm.
we're like, I don't, we don't want to take that risk, or you don't want to do this thing that might in a competitive environment make you be viewed otherwise. And so you tuck it away. And then
Mhm.
when you start doing that, that's when all the good shit happens. Like that's
I
when
agree.
your creativity shines, the podcast comes together, you align with people that are more in the vein of what you're trying to do. And then maybe some like little things kind of go by the wayside that are seemingly important. Like, I don't know, your income at Tier X or whatever might be different than that of starting a podcast, but the quality of life of like what you're doing and knowing that everything that you do, it's like all you. And so you could do that the rest of your life, and that's great. And it could be nothing, but at least you're like, honest about who you're being. Or you can tuck it all away and like pretend to be something that sucks and like make more money or something, but completely at the cost of your happiness.
Mhm. That's
But that
exactly it. That's
also,
exactly it.
I don't want to skip over you, Aliyah, too. How you
Aliyah would be fine with that, by the way.
I'm sure. No, we are going to dig on Aliyah today. That's what the goal is.
Yeah, that's so
Too funny.
Very, very funny.
We're gonna habit coach you with just whys and hows and whys and hows, and you're gonna be super uncomfortable. But no, go ahead.
Yes, I am completely exposed. I've been exposed within the first 5 minutes of this podcast. But to answer your question around the pandemic, so interestingly enough, I think my experience was on the other side of the spectrum, more corporate, more marketing strategy, kind of like a blend between creativity and analytics and logic. And I crossed a variety of different industries. So I was in financial services at first because I had picked up and moved to New York, and that was the first gig and opportunity I could get. Then I was in sports. Then I was doing a nonprofit. Then I touched tech. Like I was touching a variety of different industries. And the one thing that kind of just kept making its way back up to the forefront is somehow I kept coming up with campaigns or just different strategies and things that involved health and wellness. And so like, let's say financial services, it was like getting financially and physically fit. And this is back in like 2016. So
when it wasn't cool.
Yeah, when it was not cool.
Exactly.
Right. When it wasn't cool. And I was like, we should have this event where we bring personal coaches together. We should bring financial advisors together, like everyone's coaching and you're going a holistic route. And they were kind of looking at me like, maybe we could do that. We're not really sure. And I'm like, I'm telling you, like, this is what we should do. Like, we really need to address the whole person. And so I realized that, and I had friends that I had went to SC with that were always kind of like, Aliyah, like you've always kind of been touching this, like you hosted a health and wellness show at SC. Like people were always coming up to me and asking me questions about how I was living my lifestyle or just certain things that I was eating and things that I was doing because they wanted to look like me. And
About you.
Yeah, like, but I wasn't, the thing is, I wasn't flattered by that though. Like,
Right.
I wasn't like, oh, they want to look like me. I was kind of just like, that's interesting because I don't do any of this because I want to look like someone else. Like, I don't know.
Right. It's just like quality of life and health.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And so I was like, interesting. Like, if that's how they're associating their relationship to health, like, this is something to really unpack. And so that being said, then fast forward to the pandemic, I was talking to a friend of mine, Richard, how I'm connected to Chloe, or how I was introduced to Chloe. And I was just like, I feel like I have all this experience in marketing, branding, working at agencies, working across different industries. And I want to be in the health and wellness industry. I don't know how I want to do it. I just know that I'm not going to go back to school to become a coach. Like, that's not happening. So I'm like, how do I use my skill sets and what I've already done to progress something that I care about? And he was just like, okay, you should meet Chloe. And of course, guys, no knock to you, neither Everett or Richard really communicated to Chloe that I was going to be reaching out to her. So she's just like, who's this random chick hitting me?
You're saying like guys aren't like super great communicators or something?
I mean,
yeah.
We said it without saying it,
without saying it.
They
they didn't understand the assignment at that time.
Exactly.
So that being said, she's like, who is this chick reaching out to me? And she's like, does she want to become a trainer, like, or a coach? Am I mentoring her? And then she's like, no. Then she's like, okay, is she looking for a coach? And she's like, no. And then she's like, wait, so then what the heck does she want? Like, why is she reaching out to me? And we were on the phone for like an hour, just kind of talking about our experience in the health and wellness space, our love for music, creativity. And it was kind of almost like stepbrothers. We just instantaneously became friends, because I'm not one to really talk on the phone, to be honest. And this is my first time meeting her. And I really, when I got off the phone, I was like, was I really talking to her for a whole hour? Like, I don't do that. So I was like, she must be a very cool person.
Something's right here.
Yeah. And we just kept going from there. And then that's kind of how we came up with the idea of Continua. And at that time, we were viewing the podcast, when she and I were talking about it, as a marketing tool. Like, Chloe had brought it up. And I was like,
your respective businesses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for starting Continua. So at the time when we were starting it, we wanted to create a space where it was tempo-based type of training. And that came from my dance background.
Yep.
Where I was like, that's how I'm getting through workouts. It's like, if I concentrate and lose myself in the music, I'm not demoralized or like stressed about how many more reps I have left.
Gotcha.
I'm more into the beat. And then Chloe was talking about training and like the type of programming that she would be putting together. And when I was doing it with her, I was like, I haven't trained like this before. I've done very linear, like front and back things. I haven't done something as in depth and I think an intentional as she is with her practice. And we were like, okay, let's create an experience where we're bringing, at the time it was a live DJ with the programming together with the two of us up at the front.
This is pre-pandemic or this is post?
This is all post. This is in the pandemic. Yeah.
This is during.
That's interesting too, because obviously the pandemic was like 2 years of really everything being crazy. But within that, there was I felt like, maybe being exposed to a lot of trainers and coaches and stuff, that there was a lot of creativity in this type of thing happening of like, this is what we love to do. You're attached to this industry. What else would I do, kind of thing. And you come together. So in the middle of this, how do you guys pull that off? You're throwing a live, so DJ, guided functional workout, getting people with no rhythm to move to a tempo, which I'm sure was exciting too.
That is exactly it. Yeah.
Near each other.
And
right?
we
6 feet apart. 6 feet apart, but yeah.
6 feet apart.
For the record.
Right. And Chloe and I also...
CDC, we have it.
Everyone was tested when they came in.
Right. We hadn't seen each other, I think, for like, 5 months, Chloe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we were planning all this and strategizing this whole thing together. I mean, maybe you can blame it on just like youthfulness and optimism and ambition and just being inspired, because yes, we were trying to do something that involved being in person, outdoors, with a DJ, in the middle of the pandemic. We started a business. We hadn't even met in person, I think, for like 5 months, or something along those lines. And we made it happen. But to close it full circle, at the time, again, the podcast was just a marketing tool. It was, okay, if we can only do this experience once a month or once every now and then, how are we still keeping people engaged and having the conversations and discussions we know are really necessary to reframe people's relationship to fitness or health and vitality? And slowly but surely we recognize like, oh, we really are having fun going into the podcast studio and having guests come in and having these conversations. We're getting people's feedback that they're really enjoying our podcast. And we were like, like maybe we should give this a little bit more attention. And fast forward to where we are now.
So it's all podcast, no in person, or is it still a blend of the two events? Or I mean, the events and the podcast.
I would say it's now flipped. So we were doing both at the same time in 2020 and last year, but there was more emphasis on the experience. And now we've flipped it. So there's definitely more emphasis on the podcast, with the experience being more of a marketing tool.
I feel like I don't feel like, I know for a fact, like the podcast listener, and thank you to everyone who's listening to this, the podcast listener is like the most bought in type of consumer that you can have, because if someone's willing to sit down for an hour and a half straight through and listen to a conversation, one, they're invested in what's being talked about, but they're kind of alive for what's going on. And it's actually, I mean, who knows, you build your podcast up and the viewership and the audience, and then you could even go back to the events, but now you have this huge pool of people that are listening, that are kind of like vibing with what you guys are putting out. And then it becomes a really effective like transition into, hey, we're throwing a live event at the W this summer, whatever. All Continua listeners come. And I was just trying to think like it's the only event.
I said LOL because we were actually supposed to have an event at the W.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
I mean, and that's one of the struggles I think that we quickly realized. I do want to touch on that events is difficult to do, period. And then trying to do that in the middle of a pandemic where there's additional constraints and protocols and things that you have to do to even throw the event to get people to come out. Right. We're now dealing with skepticism of people not wanting to get sick. So that's, I think, what kind of, I don't want to say derailed, because I think it put us on the path of where we are right now, which is where we feel aligned and most called to be in the kind of journalism space, having these conversations. And to your point with the classes is kind of what we're referring to it as now. There's, let's say, for example, there's a couple of companies here in Los Angeles that showed up to some of the things that we did. And they're like, we want to offer this to our community. So now Chloe and I are able to just show up and provide that for them instead of hosting the event. Like they have an event that's already happening. Okay. Yeah. And we're like, all right, cool. We'll pull up. We'll give you guys the experience.
We will be your talent.
Yeah. We will be the talent.
As long as we don't have to plan anything, we're good.
Yeah. Like you just tell us when to be there, what the itinerary is, like what the production schedule is. We'll pull up like for that hour and a half or for that hour. Like we have your people entertained and covered. Boom. Like
this is one of the things that I think is really cool from the last year and a half is the versatility of like a given business. I mean, something like that, like you don't set out to operate any type of consulting or like business to business thing, but when you have, and this is the beautiful thing about having your time and not having to put your time into someone else's business, is like you can say yes to stuff that lights you up. So if someone, hey, we're doing an offsite for our company and we're looking for, fitness talent, music, and people to run the thing, you just go, oh, that's us. And before it would be like, oh, that sounds really cool, I'd love to do that, but I gotta like put in my PTO, get my clients covered. Now you're just like, yo, clients, we're doing this. So
is what I'm doing.
Train on Monday and Saturday because it's happening. We'll send programming for the days in between. Let's make it happen. And you just get to call those shots. And then that's where you get to be yourself. You come through finally, because it's not in front of the mask of some other job that you're trying to like, is my hair right for the job? Or I got to be going to this like seminar on the weekend when I want to do other stuff. So that's a pro, right? That's a great part of this.
Right.
how do you guys divide your energy into like, the podcast is a long play, right? To build an audience, we all, I think, can agree it's something we love to do. I truly love sitting here right now. I'm sitting here with a ring light in my guest bedroom, and I couldn't be happier. But I know it's going to take a lot of these to get to a place where this is when people say, Abe, what do you do? I say, I'm a podcast host, fucking period. That's it.
Right.
It's a long time, but I'm okay with that. How do you divide up your energy, and where do you guys decide to put that, knowing that sometimes you have to earn income, sometimes you have to create content? Like, how does that division come through for you?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And that's honestly something that we have been thoroughly working through, especially this year, starting in 2022. 2021 was it was a tough year for Aliyah and me, because we were trying to do it all, and it's just the two of us. So it just became kind of impossible. On top of that, I cut back on training to really focus on Continua. Aliyah cut back on her work too to focus on Continua. So our incomes were like very minimal, very minimal. And we were just like, we're going to make it work. We're going to do this. And, we kind of had to realize that sometimes you have to have money to make money. And so that's kind of what we realized this year, that we put our foot on the gas a little bit too much and had to put it on the brake a little bit more, which is completely fine, which is totally fine. I feel lucky that we're in this together. And so just prioritizing things, like she's on top of some things, I'm on top of others, and then we kind of come together and we meet, and we put each other in the loop, basically. And then as far as, did I answer your question, or was I totally okay?
You're rambling in the right way. You're rambling the answer out. It's great.
I'm the queen of rambling. If you've listened to any of our episodes,
you need that.
Sometimes I don't even know what I'm talking about. It's just stream of consciousness.
Do you feel like you had to make big sacrifices in your personal life, Leah, like your job and balancing these two things together?
Yeah, I would say for me, oddly enough, I was team single for a very long time. So I was dipping, dabbling, doing whatever the heck I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. No explanation, more so just not explaining myself, or like not even trying to consider including someone else in my schedule. So I think taking on Continua as a business, it's kind of like having I guess the analogy is like having a baby or having a kid. Like, it's like you're working with this thing day in and day out to grow it, to scale it. That's one thing. And then coupled with me now being in a relationship on top of that, and I had not been in one for like at least like 8-10 years. Yeah. So juggling work, adjusting to the fact that I had cut back and drastically just like shifted my mindset to be more so about Continua. I was struggling a bit with it, mainly because for me, I had a lot of workaholic tendencies, and I come from a very like work ethic, productivity family. So naturally, it was easy for me to put off my personal needs. It was easy for me to put off any of my personal wants, desires, any of those things, and just work my way through things. Yeah. Not working through the feelings or working through the emotions or working through rest, more so just like, all right, cool. Something's not going well, work. All right, cool. Didn't figure this thing out, work. Like, that's what I did. And so I think I easily hit a point of burnout because I wasn't juggling. I was throwing the ball up for work, to keep that up and letting everything else kind of fall on the wayside. And that's why I think Chloe and I working together and being in this together, like she said, has been such a blessing, because we've been able to not only divide the work that we're doing, but also understand she and I both have very different strengths. And so where I'm weak, Chloe's stronger in something, where she may have a weakness she's working through, I'm stronger in that. So we're able to really work through things together and not try to do everything. So I feel like we've developed like a sisterhood in this process, especially last year. Like she said, we put the pedal to the metal with the gas. But I think the beautiful part about that piece is that we also figured out what doesn't work. I can't remember which analogy it is. I don't know if it's Einstein, where it's every single time you do something wrong, you're that much closer to getting it right, because you can rule that thing out. And I think we had the opportunity to expedite that process last year because we went all in, as opposed to prolonging it over the course of maybe 2 years or 3 years and figuring out, oh, this doesn't work because we took our time. Like right. We accelerated that and we figured out very quickly, like, oh, this shit doesn't work. Cross that out, let it go, move on to the next thing without any like, well, let's see. We're like, anything that comes up, we're like, oh, nope, been there, done that.
That's something that I've been trying to get better at in my life. I identify with a lot of these same characteristics. Like I love to work. It's a big part of my identity. I've just, from watching my dad like work super hard when I was a kid, I just like always identified with that as this like masculine trait that I needed to replicate as I got older. And so my formative years, I read all the books that were like the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People and how to, 10X rule, just like all these things about like self-development and productivity and manifestation, all this kind of stuff. It's a little bit of a crux when you get older, because you then, as a result of not learning how to relax and step back through all those years, you then have to learn as an adult that like, okay, there is a benefit to rest. Rest itself is a discipline. It no more true in sport or gymnastics or track and field or grappling, martial arts, whatever. Like if you don't teach yourself how to chill the hell out, you're going to overwork, you'll get injured. And those are true for business as they are in personal life. So you have to know where to push yourself and where not. And that's why like recognizing the podcasting as like a long play is that you don't have to overdo it, because it's going to take a while anyway. So you can focus on like the quality and whatever that like minimal consistency that you can put out an episode or talk to your people, or how many fewer, like what's the least amount of events that we can put on as Continua that keeps us going happily with energy. Because as soon as you start tacking too many on, it shows through in personality. It's like you're on an episode and you're kind of like this. It's like, Jesus, I can't do another podcast episode. Or you're putting on an event and you're like, okay, everyone come to. It's like when people are coming to you one time for one thing, whether they're a guest or they're going to an event, they can't have 70% Chloe and 60% Aliyah, because they're only seeing you once. They got to have 100% of you, both of you on that moment, that day. And so you have to find that frequency that allows you to always be doing that. And that's really hard.
Oh yeah. And we learned it the hard way.
what was the hardest lesson that you guys learned through that?
Oh my gosh.
The biggest burn, biggest crash.
I mean, I can speak for myself because I think Aliyah and I have learned different lessons throughout this partnership. I think one of my biggest ones has been to let things go and move on. So I think because of my personality, I put a lot of pressure on myself to get things right the first time. And owning a business,
that ain't gonna work.
And this just doesn't work. It doesn't go down like that. It just doesn't.
It does not.
And and every single time up until recently, I've messed up. I've felt this like immense like just thoughts of being a failure, and I would kind of like shut down a little bit.
Leah's like, yeah, I think you do shut down when that happens.
She agrees.
She's come a long way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as of recently, I've just learned in my personal life as well to just not sweat the small things and to just keep moving forward. And we're all like, human beings are such like consequential people. So like we always have to learn from our mistakes. We're never like proactive. At least very rarely we are, right? So I kept having to like mess up and mess up and mess up and be mad at myself for messing up. Like it was this cycle for me until I was like, you know what? I'm so tired of feeling this way.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of like the energy that I'm emitting that could be used for other productive things. I'm so tired of like putting that energy into being upset with myself. And on top of that, Aliyah was like never upset with me.
Right.
It was like self-inflicted, you know? So
It's
yeah,
there's definitely a benefit to like tenacity. I think having been competitive athletes, all of us, like you need to have some grit and you need to dig your heels in every once in a while. That's like a good trait to have, knowing when to smack yourself in the face and get it done. But you also need to know when you're beating the shit out of yourself mentally for no reason. And as athletes, again, there's been plenty of times where I've experienced that, where, you know, I'm being so hard on myself that I'm not being constructive to getting over whatever mental, physical, emotional hump is in front of me. And your coaches can't really do much at that point. It's like, okay, look, we know what you're capable of. We know how to get you there. You don't really want it. It's like the kid that's just like refuses to be unmad. Okay, cool. When you're done pouting and you don't want to be mad anymore, let me know, and then we can go do whatever we got to do. And kids will just hold on to it, you know?
That was for real me, and the parent was Aliyah. Like she would just like leave me alone until like I wasn't mad anymore. She'd be like, okay, well, I'll just contact me when you're ready.
How do you deal with that stuff, Aliyah? Failures and hardships within like creating a business or pushing an idea forward?
Well, see, the thing is, I think that oddly enough, or actually, I don't know if oddly enough is the best setup, because my emphasis when I went to grad school was entrepreneurship and innovation. The idea of failing, like that was ingrained in us. It was fail fast, fail hard.
Right.
And also being in marketing, you're putting out something you don't know how it's going to do. Like you're going based off of the analytics afterwards. And there's some stuff that I've done that's been great. And there's some stuff that I've done that has been a flop. Like, and it's like, and it wasn't great. And I think because that's kind of a part of the culture of just put it out and see what it could do, I built that up over time. And I think it prepared me to have that expectation with starting a business of, as prepared as we can be, there's still going to be moments and there's still going to be things where we are going to drop the ball. And the quicker we can just look at it as like, all right, cool, what are we going to do differently? Then the better we'll be for it. I think the biggest lesson that I learned actually on the other side of that was I took on a lot more responsibility than I think I needed to. And that was more or less from a place of the workaholic thing. Of just not even thinking about, like you said, it's a discipline to take rest. And I was disciplined to do the work, but I was not disciplined to take rest. So if there was an opportunity, let's say, for example, us getting into the event space, I had done events vaguely, but then now there were all these different hats that I was putting on, and I was getting excited by it because I was learning new things, but it was at the expense of my own health. And I thought that was okay. And that was kind of just a part of the entrepreneurial culture and what the expectation is, as opposed to I need to find a balance. Some things sometimes are like, not everything is important and not everything needs to get done at my expense. Sometimes it's just like, you know what, we'll just have to do it another time and be cool with that. And that was the hardest thing for me, because it was, well, I could just do it. And sometimes that's not the answer. It's not, I could just do it and muscle through it. It's literally just let the shit go and get back to it on a different day.
I call like, okay, now what? And this happens to me. Okay, now what happens to me all week long, where I'm, you put a lot of effort into creating a really, what you perceive as a really valuable piece of content, or an article or something, and put it out, and you do all this stuff. And it just, things aren't received how you expect that they're going to be received based on your work, effort, and energy put into it at the beginning. Everything's at the beginning, right? Because it's all, your audience is small. The people that can read about or hear about or whatever you're doing is small. And so with a small sample size, things just aren't going to track the way that you want them. But your effort now, or your effort at 600,000 listeners, it's the same effort. It's just you've had a longer track underneath you. And so it gets out to the people that it should. Like, you ever look at, you create something really cool. Like maybe you guys, you work a lot on a piece of content or like promotional material for Continua, and it's sick. And like you time the cut perfect with the music and the drop and the transition. And you're like, this is the one, like, let's just do it. And you launch it, and like people are like, okay. And then you look at celebrities account, and they put some grainy ass shot of that they're driving by a gas station going 30 miles an hour. And they're like, look at this guy. And it gets shared and commented on and everything. And you're like, how? But if you are not ready for those moments in mass, just don't start. Because that's all your life is going to be when you start something new. It's just going to be maximal effort and zero return. Unlike a job, traditional job, you put in maximal effort, you're guaranteed a return, some return. Like in our case at Equinox, put in 188 sessions in a month, and I'm going to get paid 51% of my effort every time. So it's like, you could have a bad output or a high output, and you're still going to get 51%. Now you put in 100% and you get nothing for now. And you just keep like, do it over and over and over. And you can't see the forest for the trees. And then hopefully one day, you get it all back.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Abe. That's a really, really good point. I never saw it that way. But yeah, I feel like I've always been in an environment where like I could strive for something and I would get recognized for it immediately.
Yeah.
Like every single time. Whereas like just dropping myself into entrepreneurship, literally.
Brutal.
Oh, it was night and day.
It's not like track and field. Like Lauren and I talk about, I talk about this to Lauren all the time. Like, admittedly, I love recognition, straight up. I love it. And I loved it my whole life. When I was an athlete, what's better than winning? You stand literally higher on the podium than the people next to you. You're taller. People look at you like no one gives a shit you got second place. They don't. When you win, it feels, whether you win in a small sport with a small audience or a big sport with a big audience, it's huge. It's like empowering. And when you're even at Equinox, I mean, it's happened all the time. Top producing trainer, you get recognized. You get a promotion, more opportunity. It's like you're always getting pats on the back for good or decent work. Now you get no pats on the back. No one gives a fuck. And you're basically your ass. You're booking studio space. You're corralling guests. You're like, oh, this is the one. We're on our test. We're gonna blow. People are like, who's that? You're like, who's that?
My God.
It's Meta World. Like, what? What do you mean, who's that? They're like, oh, sorry, it's not a TikTok star that like shows you what they're putting on their clothes for the weekend.
Right. It's so interesting too. Two things. One, definitely with the piece of just like, I think what I've taught myself over the time, and I think Chloe, correct me if I'm wrong, Chloe, is starting to also embrace too. Rule of thumb, I go into it like nobody cares. Like, but that's what my mindset is with marketing. Cause I've been trained to like, I have to create messages where it's like, I'm not writing for myself. I'm not talking to me. If I'm talking to this particular audience, how do I make them care? It doesn't matter if I care. It matters if they care. And so
such a good point on this.
Going into that's kind of, I think, been a little bit helpful for this journey, and also being open to where it can go. We may have ideas. We've pivoted, changed our business model, business verticals multiple different times to adjust and adapt to what's working and what's not working, and just having faith that it's going to work itself out. And then previously, to your point, one thing I wanted to add was when we first started, Chloe and I were on opposite ends of the coin, where she was ready to be the front and the face of the brand, and I was not. I wanted to be more behind the scenes. I wanted to focus more on building something that people can connect to that wasn't necessarily me, because it felt overwhelming for people to want a piece of me or a piece of my time and a piece of my attention. Like I'm introverted. So to me, I'm just like, hold up. This is a lot. Like you got to chill. And so I think over time, we've slowly adapted to the fact of like, as the hosts for the podcast, as the two people leading this experience and this class, people like it because it's us two together and the chemistry and the sisterhood we have together.
Right.
And I've slowly to come out of my own shell with that and adapt to that piece of us being the brand. And I definitely do think for me that that's something that I'm getting more comfortable with by being in this with Chloe. Now, if this was like Aliyah stepping out on her own, doing her own thing, everyone give Aliyah a call, I'd be like, hell no. Like,
right.
I'm not available. Like, here's this thing you can call during these operating hours. Chances are it's not me operating it either. So talk to somebody else. So yeah, so
just
that
completely uninviting.
Yeah, like yeah. I'm just keeping it real.
You know what? Don't call. How about that? No, it's funny. It's funny how like working alongside. Well, I mean, I say this as I'm like doing all of this completely solo, so nothing that I'm about to say matters. But it is true that working alongside someone can bring out different qualities. And to your point, you guys complement each other. Chloe's creativity and forwardness is challenging you to come out of your shell, and then your business knowledge and understanding of the marketing side is teaching her about how to grow this business side of it too. So you end up being two really important pieces to the puzzle. And then the listener gets that. They don't get the whole, like, you're figuring it out. They just get that on the end. And that's what matters. I got excited because you were talking about this. And I think it's so, as someone who, like, I've always been fascinated by marketing, but I didn't study it, didn't work in it. And Chloe, I think you'll align with this. So in fitness, the hardest thing for me when I, at least starting to, whether it's marketing a podcast or my other business, the ski system is like an online training business for skiers. So they can go on and, get subscription to training programs, stuff like that. There was such a disconnect in the initial like media pieces that I was putting out for that. And it just wasn't clicking. And I realized I was marketing to me, the coach of 6+ years. And I remember when we were trainers, I would see stuff online or on like Instagram, I get targeted, and it's like hit classes, never leave without being sweaty. Like there's all these things that I'm like, that's so dumb. That's not how it works. Like sweat doesn't equal a good workout, or sweat doesn't mean you're burning calories. Like whatever dumb things, are important to me, a coach who's trying to like feel good about my credibility and my ego as like, I'm the authority here. That shit doesn't matter. What matters is that the person scrolling on their phone is like, I always love to sweat when I work out. Cool. Like you have to figure out a way to talk to the other person, the person that you're trying to get to listen. And I speak to myself, if you're too concerned about being a smart ass, then you sound like an asshole, and no one wants to connect with that stuff because it's so far away from where they are.
Like that's so relatable. Everything you're saying is so relatable. Abe, I mean, yes, there was a very big learning curve for me, and Aliyah had to teach me a lot about what to say and how to say things on social media. So I'm usually the writer of like the posts, and then she goes back and edits it so that it's like digestible, because I'll be throwing out like words that people have no definition to, like people don't understand, like not normal, but people who are not in our industry don't know what periodization means,
Right. They're like,
and I'll just, yeah,
sucks.
Exactly. And so I think it does come a little bit from ego, at least on my part too, or at least it did. I always felt like I have something to prove. Like, let me prove all of my knowledge to you. So I'm going to write this like really extensive, super wordy post that people in our industry will understand, and I will get recognized for it. And people will know, oh, Chloe knows what she's talking about. But for the actual like mainstream consumer, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
All they're going to do is
odds are they would just
they do. They hear it and they go, That's what they do, the coaches and everything. And then the people that are listening go, what? And the people that
Yeah.
are coming, they're the ones who you want to hit subscribe or submit their
Exactly.
email address or share a phone
Exactly.
number or share with a friend. And if all you're getting is pats on the back from other coaches, that won't grow your business, period. Like, and that's true for anything. If you're an engineer and you use wordy engineering terminology and you're trying to launch a platform, you can't do that. Like, you have to speak to the people that you're trying to bring on to participate in your knowledge, not be like put off by it. When you're, Aliyah, when you're like thinking about the marketing and growth of Continua, how do you, because you bring a different perspective to it, like you do understand the marketing side of it and how to communicate those messages to people. So what are you like looking out for, and what is the community that you're trying to build within the show, the brand? We'll call it brand, I think.
Yeah. So this is where and why Chloe and I make such a great team. This would be at this moment targeting whether it's working professionals, busy creatives, people that are interested in their health and want to balance it and are looking for a place to kind of start the discussion, start the conversation, little things here and there to kind of pique their interest where they can dive deeper. But with qualified and good information. So we're not doing the what terminology am I, burn so good or no pain no gain. Like we're not saying that, and I know what that looks like in the marketing industry. Like I've been on that side of it where that's what's being advertised, that's what's being pushed out, and to your point, it's not correct. And I know it's not correct because I'm working with Chloe. And so we're looking for that middle ground of, yes, it could be entertaining and educational. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There's an opportunity for both to coexist in the conversation so that there's more people that could be included in the conversation. If more people knew, I would get less people in the past that were coming up to me asking me if they could look like what they need to do to get my arms. That they wouldn't ask me that question. You know what I mean? They would be more focused on, what is my optimal vitality? What is my optimal health? Like, what exercises do I need to do to make myself feel good? How can I get more access to information or resources that are going to help me be the best version of myself, instead of I'm just going to look at this person and I want to be just like that.
Right. I think that we got to get away from that ultimately, because that's where, I mean, toxic, not toxic, whatever. It's just not healthy when you're constantly trying to be like someone else for two reasons. One, it's not going to happen. Physiologically, you could do all the shit you want to do. You're not going to end up looking exactly like someone else because you're not them. And in this day and age, you might not have had all the work that they've had done. You know, like there's that whole side of it too. So you don't know what it's going to take.
Let's just say it for what it is.
Right. But if you go switch the focus onto your vitality, your longevity, your health, things that you guys talk about on the show, your sleep, now it's like, by focusing on feeling better yourself, you get all these other benefits anyway. But if you're only focusing on trying to look like somebody else, you're effed, because it's an uphill battle with no top. Like you can't get there. It's not going to happen. But you can get to the most optimal version of yourself if you focus on those things. So like when you are speaking to your listeners, what are some of like the pillars of, I'll say pillars just because that's it's a little knock to Equinox. Like we always focus on these pillars.
No
right?
wonder. Now I know where it comes from, because Chloe has said pillars so many different times.
Let's not say pillars. Let's say
so
founding principles.
She's like, these are our pillars. And I'm like, where's this pillars coming from? Like,
oh, those are the ones that we are indoctrinated to stand on.
Oh my God.
What are the founding principles for what you are trying to share with people? And is this like a for women by women type approach, or is this really general, like for everyone looking to improve their life?
Yeah, I would say
we are not gender specific.
I'll let Chloe elaborate on the principles. I'll definitely say it's not just for women. We've had some men come on, and specifically, I think a couple of the most beautiful episodes that we did have on is men, and talking about vulnerability and emotional vulnerability, going to therapy, Black men specifically. And that's a narrative, and that's a conversation and message that's not really out there, you'd be surprised how hard it is. And you probably even know how difficult it is to find like a men's wellness group or like therapy for men. You can go online and it's hard to find, but for women now there's whole resources, there's multiple different pages, there's all different things you can touch on. So we've had that on there where it's not gender specific, and it's more so about anyone listening. If you're curious and you want to improve your health, that's enough. But the one thing I do want to emphasize is that we're not preaching or boasting perfection. Like coming on to our podcast, the guests that we have on and the conversations that we have isn't, I have it all together. And this is why I have it all together.
Yeah,
and this is why you should listen. Yeah, this is why you should listen to me, because I have it all together. I know why Chloe's laughing, but but like that's if that's what you're looking for, that's not our narrative. Our narrative is come curious, you can get educated, and it can be entertaining stuff, and it's healthy. It's healthy infotainment. So I'll kick it to Chloe with what the principles
That's good
are.
too. Being clear about what you're not is an important part of getting specific with your audience, to because then like if that is what you're looking for, it's not here.
Yeah. If you're curious about your house, check out the podcast. If you're curious, you should check out the podcast. Curious about health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another
or
conversation.
even if you're not, check out the podcast and maybe
right.
I mean, maybe we'll change your mind.
Yeah.
What in your words, Chloe, what are kind of your founding principles or purpose on the show?
Yeah. Honestly, when we launched Continua, I was thinking about what are the things that have optimized my life. Like what are the things that have like allowed me to thrive and to be like the best version of myself. And so then I kind of started like naming things in my mind, and that's kind of how we came up with our principles.
Yeah, not pillars. Principles.
So obviously movement has been like one of the biggest parts of my life. So that's one, definitely. What you fuel yourself with, that's another one. How well you recover, that's a big one. How well you sleep, another one. Who I associate myself with is a really big one. Who's in my inner circle? Like who can I have like meaningful, impactful conversations with? Like who's going to elevate me and who can I elevate? That's a really big one. Squad.
That's
we call
a
it
hard
squad.
one when you, as you get older. Wait, how old are you guys?
29. We're both 29.
29.
30 this year.
Basically 30.
We'll be 30 this year.
We'll just claim the 3 in front of
Oh
the
God, less than 6 months.
No, it's cool. Trust me. I'm 3 years on the other side. It's very good.
On the other side, I'm weak.
Yeah. It is weird how you form relationships through your 20s that seem, well, first you do it in high school and like you're pretty set that those are the most valuable relationships you'll ever have in your life, and that they're forever.
Yeah.
Just because you're young and ignorant, you haven't experienced anything else. And then you start to realize like, okay, maybe I'm a little bit different. You hang on to a few, but you realize you're different than some of your high school friends, and some of the things that you spend a lot of time doing maybe don't interest you anymore. And then in your 20s, you're this kind of like from the hip, you're just all over the place. You're like trying to hustle, and you're meeting everyone, and you're developing good and valuable relationships. But there is a point that you realize that people that it's the cliche, right? Like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but there is so much truth to that, because you're either giving energy out or you're taking energy in all the time. It's like breathing.
Exactly.
And so if you're breathing in certain people, you're going to act like them. You're going to think about things the way that they think about them. And so when you recognize that, like, you drive the bus a little bit on that, and you get to make some decisions like, who do I want to spend my time with? Who do you want in your squad? Like, what kind of values do they have? What things are they curious about? And you get to like participate in that growth process, but it also takes some, like, you got to cut some people out of your life too. And that's hard, really hard, especially if your lives are interwoven. how have you both, and you can answer separately or together, but have you had to cut people out of your life and done this like objectively?
So I honestly, I feel like I've been very, very lucky in my friendships. And I think it's because I have always been very like intuitive and very like energetic. So I can recognize when someone is a little toxic and recognize if someone is going to like help me move forward in my life, and I can do the same for them. So honestly, for every chapter in my life, we'll say, I have like 2 friends.
It's very structured.
Yeah, I'm a Virgo, if you couldn't tell.
I don't know much about astrology, but I would imagine that these are characteristics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see everything as like, okay, everything has to be like in a nice, beautiful order. But yeah, like my childhood friends, I have 2 like very close friends. From college, 2 very close friends. From Equinox, 2 very close, like, and now I have Aliyah. So I have a handful of people, and then my fiance, of course. I have these handfuls of people, or this handful of people. Am I saying that right? Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Who are my inner circle, and I don't really stray away from that. Like I have like more than acquaintances, less than friends, people, you know, who like I can absolutely get along with and hang out with if we're in a big group. But there are definitely like my handful of people who I can absolutely count on, who they know they can count on me, and like we're just gonna ride this wave together for, you know, for as long as we can.
What about you, Aliyah?
So I think, it's interesting.
You've been cutting people out of your life, haven't you? I can tell. I know.
That's why I went first.
And people didn't make the cut for sure with Aliyah.
And look, and maybe if I didn't make their cut, I was like, I'm glad. So the thing is, I'll say for me, my family has been a constant. I've also moved a lot. I think that there's been a lot of environmental circumstances and things out of my control in my life where the constant has been family. So whether it's moving, moving definitely being a factor, familial circumstances changing, certain things, just I'd say life. Let's just call it life for what it is. And I think that that's something that I recognize and embrace at a really, really young age, probably like elementary school. So I was a little bit more detached from my friendships to start. Like it started off being detached.
You mean you kind of keep them like over here just in case you got to bail?
Yes, exactly. That's how I built the majority of my friendships from maybe about, I'd say, elementary school until my late 20s. And so, which is a very long time. I'm not saying that's a good thing.
Chloe, you're on the fence, by the way.
No, Chloe actually helped me work through that. Yeah, she's helped me work through that piece. But I think it's more so out of one foot in, 1 foot out, but also 2, I've just recently, similar to the analogy I was drawing of us being at the forefront of our brand and having a voice in saying something, or just sticking and standing firm in what we're saying, that's something that I'm starting to do on behalf of my own voice and myself. So I think that there's some people who are staying where it's like, oh, cool, like then they really were my friend. And then there's others where it's like, oh, well, served its purpose. I'm not going backwards. Like I'm not regressing. I'm only moving forward. And as I'm moving forward, I'm more boldly myself. So whoever's going to stick is going to stick, and whoever isn't. So I think it's more of a growing apart type of thing, but cutting was for sure my thing back in college and high school. Yeah, I'd be like, and the thing is, it wouldn't even sometimes.
No, it wouldn't. She would ghost people. It was like just that's it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a
no explanation. Exactly.
I would just be like, oh.
So it's so interesting talking to you guys. Like you are 2 of the same. It's so funny. You are the same person, but you complement each other in such interesting ways. It really is like, I can see how the Continua is going to work really well, because and it's not that you do bring different components, but they truly are the opposite elements of each other.
Yeah.
Like Chloe's
Yeah.
creativity and your macro view of things is very apparent. And then Aliyah, like just the way that the talk and think about your business, it's structured, and they're both like this, it's like, I can see how this is working very well.
That's hilarious.
It's fun to create like something together.
Agreed. I think we've had the unique opportunity of like not knowing each other for a long time. And so we are, I mean, any business partnership is like a relationship, right? So
100%.
Her and I are literally building this relationship as we're going. And because we met each other during a very like pivotal time in our lives, like, like mid to late 20s, a lot changes, a lot, just you change a lot, or I should say you evolve, you're evolving, right? And we're lucky that we're kind of like, we're evolving together, but in totally different ways, but they're still very complementary to one another.
Totally.
And we are learning to communicate better. And because we're learning to communicate better, that's spilling into other relationships in our lives and other friendships. With her and her boyfriend and me and my fiance, it's all working together, and it's really awesome.
Business is, as we get older, I mean, you spend a large portion of your time on whatever your business is, if it's entrepreneurial or if it's corporate. You just spend a lot of hours and energy and space there. And so if that ends up being a space that's like constructive and it's a give and a take, and it sounds like you guys have really good communication where you can talk to each other and it's heard, that's the hardest part, is that you give criticism and it's taken as a personal attack. If you can see criticism as criticism, just it is what it is. Cool. Thank you. Okay. I'll work on that. By the way, you blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. I'll work on that. That is constructive to the relationship. And then it's, like you said, it spills, because now your actual character of who you are is changing.
Exactly.
Even though you're changing for the betterment of the business, it's still changing who you are as a person. And that's a good thing, because then you become, maybe you listen to Aliyah better and digest the information that she tells you, but then your fiance says something, you're like, you know what? Okay, I can, instead of immediate that knee jerk, like, oh, it's not me, it's you. Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna totally take that in. I may not agree with you right now, but I'm gonna sit on that. And then, we'll go from there. But that's like a skill, right? You learn that as you go, kind of thing.
1000% a skill. And honestly, so my fiance and I have gone to couples counseling, like couples therapy.
How do you like that?
And the things that, the most incredible, I like it more than one-on-one therapy.
Really?
I've
heard of like people doing this. I've always thought it was weird, because I'm like, why would you go if nothing is wrong? Which is so stupid, because that's like, I'm only going to work out if I'm overweight.
Again, we're consequential people, right?
Yeah.
So why not do it, and he's wanted to do it for a long time. I think we're not even getting married anytime soon. It's just something that he's wanted to do. He had to drag me at first, but
you should work on that.
But I say this because I learned a lot about myself in couples therapy. And I think there's a couples therapy is very unique, because there are two people telling the same story, but from two totally different perspectives. So when you're in just individual therapy, your therapist is only hearing your side of the story. Like it's not like she can like contest what you're saying, right? Whereas in couples therapy, like you say your side, the other person says their side, and you're like, wait a second, like I thought we were
how it happened.
Wait, that's not how it happened at all, but yeah, I think our therapist, he really challenged me. He challenged me a lot, and I grew so much from that, and I brought that into my partnership with Aliyah.
Super cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
All of my said thanks.
I think this
Thanks,
whole
Jeffrey.
the fact that you're doing that. So my parents divorced when I was 16. At the time, sucked.
11.
After the time, sucked worse. And then later in my adult life, I was like, whoa, that was a lot more damaging than I even accepted at the time, right? And that's when, for the first time in my adult life, I saw a therapist and was like, hey, I don't really know what's going on here. This is bothering me, but it's like always on my mind bothering me. I need to just talk to someone about like what's going on. And it was pretty effective. But I was thinking about it, and I think it's really cool that our generation is doing that. Like, you can go with your fiance to couples therapy with nothing wrong and talk about it on a podcast or share that information with friends, and it's not taboo. It's like, oh, cool, they're like doing a solid for their relationship. Whereas in the past, like my dad, mom weren't going to go to couples therapy. That's not what they were. They're not geezers, but like when they were growing up, that was not their thing. That it was like, figure it out. Don't talk about it. Don't share anything. Don't get to know the other person's issues, and definitely don't spend hard-earned money with a shrink. The whole concept was shit on. Like, they're not called therapists; they're called shrinks. Just to again put them in just put them in the box that sucks.
Right.
And now you can do something like that, and it's like that's cool. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. Also, I was laughing at some of what Chloe was saying of how she's brought that back into our partnership together. I think I've definitely grown where I've been able to develop more fruitful and mature friendships as a result of our business partnership together with some friends that I've had before, even where it's like, I think we're actually getting to know each other. Ironically, I might've been friends with some of them for like maybe 10 years, 8 years, stuff from college, but I don't really think that I allowed them the opportunity to really get to know me. So at least now in this space, some of the practices that she's done, like I also go to therapy as well. And I say that very proudly and have no issue with it, but it allows for better connection, better communication, and also being okay that not everybody is for you. And I think that's the biggest level for me that I'm working through and that I've crossed, because my detachment was more so from a place of, I don't want to hurt other people's feelings. I don't want to say something that's going to be displeasing, all of that. So I just, I would be like, all right, cool, arm's distance. But now it's kind of like, well, I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. I'm not maliciously trying to do anything to harm anyone, but at the same time, if I'm not allowing myself to be authentically myself, I'm doing myself a disservice. The people that celebrate me and that want to be around me will be around me, and those that don't, that's okay too. There's no hard feelings, no harm, no foul. It is what it is, and just being okay with that piece.
I think that's really important. That's a super important part. Like me personally, I think right now in society, there's a little bit too much sensitivity. Like, people are a little bit too sensitive about just everything. And I know that there's sensitivities exist for a reason, and you want to be respectful to people, right? Like, if no one should go out of their way to make someone feel uncomfortable or be disrespectful or be a jerk. I've always felt, but that's like a value item for me. I just think morally we should be kind.
Yeah.
But you should also be able to just be you, like be you, and be like almost brash about it, and not so concerned with how it's going to be taken. Because if you're concerned about it, then you're compromising how you are. And then you're doing it for someone else's acceptance, which is trash, because then you're going to end up building relationships that are made on false pretenses anyway. So it'd be better to be brash and get like pushback and realize that that's like not the right deal for you, than to change how you are to try to appease people.
I totally agree. I think that most people who haven't gone to therapy operate from a perspective that they have to be a certain way because they think that someone else is perceiving them a certain way.
What do you mean?
So how do I say this? Let's see. sometimes you think that you're perceived the way that other people are perceiving the way that you're perceived. So there's a
I feel like
lot
this is like
of,
Memento.
I think, yeah, no, it totally is.
So wait,
yeah.
no, but I want to
So-
like, I want to get this. I want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so basically, like, you are living your life the way that you think other people are viewing your life. So you're seeing yourself through the eyes of someone else who is seeing you through the eyes of themselves.
I'm a little lost, but
Okay,
I think
okay.
I'm close.
let me-
I think I'm close. I think I'm
Chloe,
close.
let me try and crack it and see if this is what you're
Okay.
saying. Essentially, if I'm trying to 101 it or make it A plus B equals C, I would say that she's saying that, let's say, for example, Chloe, and how Chloe is living her life. She's more concerned about how I'm perceiving her. So she's trying to live up to the expectations of how,
Which she's creating in her head.
right,
That
which
had
she's
nothing
creating
to
in
do
her
with how
head
you
that have
actually feel.
nothing to do with
Gotcha.
me.
See, that's that relationship thing I was talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
it works. It's the,
No,
they both work
sometimes
very
like
well.
I have something in my head and I really try my best to articulate it, but it just doesn't come through sometimes.
That's
We
normal.
got it though.
That's I do that all the time. I'm like writing and I write something and I look back and I'm like, no one is ever going to read that sentence and see what I was talking about. And I got to like go back and just comb it, be like simpler.
Definitely.
But yeah,
I mean, so yeah, I say that because if you do the work, if you go to therapy and you do the work, you get to know yourself better. So you start to not care about how you're perceived.
I think people are afraid of that though. People are afraid of knowing who they
1000%.
are, you know?
Oh yeah.
Because
I
scary
completely
shit.
agree.
When you go, you got to
Ignorance is
dig
bliss.
up.
Oh, exactly.
You got to unpack the shit.
And
that
that's why
sucks.
Aliyah and I both, like, we like to associate ourselves with people who are emotionally intelligent and who have done the work, who've worked on themselves, who like know themselves, because or else there's just a lot of flub.
And there
So
really
much
is
flub.
there's a difference too. I think it's worth saying. There's a big difference between working with a professional psychologist who's trained in helping you do this and working
And a
with like
self-help book.
a life coach that did a weekend certification whose life's super
Yes.
broken and battered themselves and have no business instructing other people on how to live a better life. But when you work with an actual professional who's gotten their degree in it and they've done the full schooling, it's not by accident that they land on the questions that they land on and the path that they choose. It's based on research. They can actually like clinically help you. And in the current space of social media and online availability, I feel like there's an abundance of like BS coaches that aren't qualified really to help. So seeing an actual professional who's like versed in this kind of stuff, it's like a game changer.
I think the biggest way to differentiate between the two, and I empathize with what you're saying, is how it's being advertised and what's being marketed. When it's someone that is clinically trained or has the background and the experience, they're not coming to you guaranteeing like, I'm gonna fix you and your life is gonna be all better and all these different things. They're more
because
so
they know that's not true.
Right. They're more so kind of like, this is gonna be tough.
Yep.
But we're going to get through it, period. And it kind of ends there. It's open-ended, it's abstract, and it's more so around, are you willing to do the work? And I think a lot of, to your point of what you were saying about just popping up for a weekend, getting a certification, that's similar to, I'm going to draw the parallel to the fitness industry of just saying, drink this tea,
100%.
you're going to lose some weight. Do this thing, you're going to drop 5 pounds, where it's more of a Band-Aid and a quick fix it instead of actually addressing the roots that are seemingly symptoms. Right. And doing that, it's like, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of myself where I'm like, damn, like I'm just being honest.
So funny to say this. I always
being
wonder.
honest, like that's what it is. Well, and then when you get to that, then you're like, either like, are you going to do something about it? But it really takes that courage and that bravery to look yourself in the mirror or really sit with yourself and either embrace it about yourself. I would say not either. embrace it about yourself, have grace, and then be like, okay, I'm going to change that, or I'm going to do this about it. I'm going to do that about it. And also even things in the past of like, I'm going to unpack this, but this is no longer relevant to me anymore.
Yeah.
It applied at a period of time, but like, that's where it stays. Cool. Part of my journey and my story, but like, I'm not carrying that luggage or that baggage with me moving forward.
But that's exactly the reason why people don't want to do the work. That's exactly why like people like to have like surface level friendships, because they're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being perceived a certain way. And I just want to add, I found the quote that I was looking for, and I think
please. Please.
Okay, I'm sure you know who Shetty is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was listening to the School of Greatness, a podcast, and he was a guest on it like a couple of years ago. Anyway, so okay, his quote is, "I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think who you think I am."
Say the last part.
I am who I think who you think I am.
Okay. That, I get that. That's actually really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was trying to get at, is we're living our lives through the eyes of someone else because we think that's who they think we should be.
I wonder how much of that though is a result of social media.
Yeah, because, like, I mean, social media has definitely made it worse, 1000%.
But yeah, I guess always
I wouldn't necessarily say
for that perception.
Yeah, I don't think it's stemmed from social. Yes, exactly. I think since the dawn of time, human beings just want to be liked and accepted and a part of a community. So if you're the oddball, if you're the ugly duckling and you're not a part of a community, you're alone, and no one wants to be alone.
Yeah, I mean, knowing how to be alone with yourself is really important, I think.
Oh yeah.
I feel like at some point you gotta just like do that a little bit and see how it goes, whether you're a people person or not, because there's a lot to learn there. But it's a funny thought experiment for me that I don't think about this all the time, because I would probably be like wildly narcissistic, but I just think about if I met me just as I am right now, if I was like walking around town and I bumped into myself and was somehow got on a conversation and got to like know me a little bit, like what would I actually think? Because you're kind of always carrying yourself as like, this is the person that other people want to be around, like you're trying to be the best version of yourself. But I wonder if you did meet just you as you, would you stand yourself? Would you walk away and go like, man, that guy's a dick, or like, oh, she was crazy, or I would never hang out. Funny. Like, what would that experience be like? And in doing that, and actually, I mean, this is not enough time to reflect on that, but in like really reflecting on that, there's a lot of insights there into being able to switch the lens and look at yourself from not who you are and think about it like, oh, okay, these are kind of your characteristics. These are your tendencies, the things that you identify yourself as, or like who you think you are, and then who you are really at the core. And then these are the things that like no one knows about, that you seem to reserve for only you.
Right.
And what if you found those out about you? Would you then be like, oh, this person is so weird, or whatever? It's just kind of interesting. I don't know.
We all have secrets, Abe. We all have secrets.
But to that point, though, I feel like that's what allows you to develop really good relationships with people, is when you're not your best self. And even when you're trying to, the other little stragglers and pieces kind of show themselves. And whoever that other person is still choosing to love you and accept you, and vice versa, then that's, to me, I think, a really good bond and a really good friendship, relationship, familial relationship, all those different things. I think those are the ones that count, and those are the ones that matter. And I'm more so just creating space for more of those, of like what's going to bring out the best in me, and not necessarily in terms of like what looks good, but where am I at peace and where are you at peace? And if I'm constantly on trying to improve myself, how am I still able to show up where it's encouraging you to do the same thing? So it's a mutually beneficial relationship and transaction. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Because we're all a work in progress. So can we be a work in progress together? It's a yes or
exactly.
That's like a mic drop moment almost. I want to be respectful of your guys' time here too. And I have one kind of last question that I want to ask Aliyah first, because I have a feeling how Chloe will answer, just because we're kind of from the same school.
Predictable.
No, because I would assume that your answer is going to be similar to mine, but it's about routine. And the reason I wanted to ask this is because you've both aligned in this like health wellness space, but admittedly, and like on the website, I'm sure you guys talk about this too, and then in the bios, very different backgrounds for how you got there. Chloe's much more functional approach with like the athletic background as a gymnast. Aliyah, but you said that you kind of found it on a different path, and then you've both learned things from each other too in that. So walk me through the first hour of you waking up.
Ooh, see, that's an interesting question, because pre-pandemic, I was very predictable and I had a very specific routine of I was going to bed by 10 p.m. and I was getting up anywhere between like 6:30 to make sure I started my day with working out. But that was because that felt like sacred time to myself. Like I felt like that was my me time, because I was working somewhere else and I was putting my energy towards someone else's dream. Not that that's bad. I think there's
not a knock.
No knock at all. Because there's something for everyone. There's pros and cons to everything. And on the flip side, now that I'm building something with Chloe, I'm consciously having to check myself to create a routine, because it's very easy for me to just wake up and work and not even do
that ain't gonna
my
fly
workout routine, right? And not do my routine. But that's because I'm somewhere, like I'm still working through it, but like my brain's a little bit confused between that me time, because that's actually my desire. Like this is something that I would want to do, but I'm still looking for a healthy balance between that. Backtracking though, in terms of routine, like I grew up, like because I started in gymnastics, then I went to cheer, then I was dancing in college. I was working, interning on the team and going to school at the same time. So I was very regimented, and that's just how I was raised. Yeah. that's just how I was raised. So I think now it's a big test, because it's on my time. Like, how am I going to do this on my time? And that's something I'm still working through.
Fair. And Chloe?
I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of in the same boat as Aliyah, because this is the first time in my life where I've had so much freedom, I guess you can say. Just like in college, my last semester, I had 2 jobs, an internship, ran track, plus I had a boyfriend, Everett, plus school. And so I was like, everything was like on the hour, by the hour. And then Equinox, I mean, my time wasn't quite my own, really. I mean, and so now it's so hard to say. Like my morning routine is, I don't really have a morning routine, because most of my clients are in the morning.
Yeah.
And so I start my day with clients. And to be honest, I'm like scarred by having to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to train my first client. I'm not even lying. Like I just promised myself, like I would never wake up that early again. Like,
well, good on you though for saying that, and then holding. I mean, that in itself is, it's not a routine, but like I feel like there's more payout there to your well-being than like forcing yourself into some routine box that doesn't even work.
Exactly. And I do think about, like Everett is in grad school right now, so he's at school all day. He comes home at like 7 or 8, and I don't want to go to bed at 9 and only spend an hour with him,
Right.
So I'm like cognizant of that as well, and spending my time with the person who I want to spend my time with. And so I'm willing to go to bed a little bit later and wake up a little bit later so that I can have my time with him.
Well, it's interesting. The routine question is always funny, because I feel like if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you read self-development geared towards business things, it's just drilled into your head that you have to have this. And I mean, I'm a victim and a supporter of this. Like, I have a crazy routine, right? It starts at 5 a.m. and it's a product of like reading and embodying all this stuff for a long time. But there's also a benefit to doing what feels right for you. So like in your case, you've been on that track before, on the 4:30 a.m. wake up every single day on the dot, probably kind of like zombie through your morning thing, a coffee, get dressed, go, whatever. And then now it's actually more of a benefit to step back and be like, look, life's too short, right? Like, what's
That's
we
exactly
won't
it.
know the neurological payout for that either, because we don't have a way to measure it. But like, it
Right.
might be huge. It might have been that if you had stayed locked into this crazy regiment and like million hours a week mentality, it would have taken your life. And now you have a much more relaxed demeanor about it, and it could be huge. It could be benefiting you in ways that you'll never understand. It could be adding years to your life. Who knows? It could be improving the quality of your sleep because you have less stress through the morning hours, less cortisol production, and like, who knows? So I always like to ask that for that reason too, because sometimes the answer is I don't have one, and this is why. And it's like, oh,
I just want to get back to a balance. I think there's a benefit to a routine. I want to plan to deviate from the plan. Like, I'm okay if the plan changes, but I like having a North Star, and then we could just be spontaneous and make it up as we go, depending upon how the day goes from that.
And that's relatable too, because I think that there's probably a lot of people out there that are striving to establish something, and being honest about that, hey, even in this like go-getter mentality business creation mode that we're in, still trying to figure it out too.
The pandemic flipped it on its head for me, so I'm still like, I'm still a little discombobulated, where I'm kind of just like, there's me pre-pandemic and then there's me post-pandemic. So then I'm like, where am I netting out? I don't even know if I could say post-pandemic, but where I'm netting out,
it might go right back into one.
Right, I'm like, where I'm netting out on that, and just who do I want to be transcending both.
I'm so pandemic done.
Sure.
I'm pandemic done.
Yeah.
I'm like, nope, no more.
Yeah.
Let's move forward. I really want us to all be able to move forward. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's 2 years. I remember Equinox, like, they closed, and I told my manager, I'm like, we're going to be out for a while, bro. And he was like,
I called it as well.
We're back in a week. I was like,
listen,
nah, you don't
listen.
We're back in a week. I'm like, that's the most blindly optimistic thing. It's a global pandemic. Like, we're not coming back to work. We're in a gym, dude. All people do is breathe in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were the last to come back. I mean, yeah, when they decided that they were going to open up their doors again, that's when they gave me an ultimatum, and they said, either you come back or you don't. And I said, listen, like,
I'm out of here. Yeah.
I can't do it. I just completely disagree with you guys opening up. Nothing has changed. Literally nothing.
I remember
has changed
when you left.
Yeah. And it was,
like, I was
the toughest decision ever. Yeah, I remember I told like you and like a couple of people, because I didn't want to
I went back to work with, like,
until
I had sweaty latex gloves on and a mask on. I'm like, I'm kind of walking around like, I shouldn't really be here. What if this is really bad and I'm the asshole walking around with like latex gloves on, getting sick? I gotta go. I'm like, you guys gotta shut this down. It's not gonna work. Well, look, I want to be respectful of your guys' time. And this was super fun. I mean, we cruised. That's like an hour and 30 minutes.
I know.
It always goes like that.
Man.
Every time. I'm like, okay, it'll be like, an hour. And then it's an hour and a half nonstop. And it's pretty cool because, especially with the pandemic, here we go, dragging it out longer for the listeners.
I have like 10 more minutes, so we're good.
But with the pandemic, you weren't really, granted, this isn't face to face, obviously, it feels like it by now, whatever, but sitting down and talking to someone for an hour and a half is a crazy concept. I don't do this with my family. Like, think about how many
Mhm.
other people in your life have you sat down with and talked to for an hour and a half? Like,
True.
nobody. It's just a very special time to sit and actually talk and like
Right.
work through things that you don't understand or bring up ideas and share them. It's just, I think that's why I love it so much, is because it's rare. I don't get to
Mhm.
experience this very much. And so selfishly, I'm like addicted to this now.
And it's
I don't know
gonna
if
work
you
in
both
your
We're in
share
the
that.
same
favor.
boat.
Yeah.
This is
We're in
such
the
a
same
great
boat as you.
conversation.
Yeah. We will have to do it again in the future. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
thank you both. All the information for Continua will be in the show notes. So anyone who's not yet already clicked over to that kind of stuff, it'll be there. You can find them, follow along, Instagram, social media. And then when you do events, go and do one of their events because it's going to be incredible. So thank you both so much for being on here.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
This was
is
awesome.
Yes.